What do writing and pinup art have in common? Stick with me today to find out. I mostly follow authors on Twitter, but I also follow some other creative type people. One of these people is Noelle Stevenson. She's a comic artist and an illustrator. You might know her name or recognize her artwork style because she did the cover art for Fangirl. It's so very pretty. Recently, Noelle started a discussion on Twitter about pinup art. Basically, she feels like a lot of modern pinup artists are taking too much inspiration from existing old pinup art and not enough from real life models. This results in pinup art looking less and less like real people. This got me thinking about writing. If we base our characters too much on the characters in books that we've read and not enough on real life people, will it make our characters seem less realistic to our readers? I don't know much about drawing. I'm actually not very good at it, but I assume that when you're working with a model, you're going to highlight certain features. So maybe the model you're working with has large, beautiful eyes, so you decide to emphasize that and make them look just a little bit bigger. Then you have another artist who comes along years later and loves your artwork and is inspired by it and draws people with even bigger eyes. Then another artist comes along inspired by that second artist and draws people with even bigger eyes. And then eventually we end up with drawings of people who look like aliens because their eyes are so big. Just like in art, authors tend to emphasize certain characteristics of their characters, although for us it's more likely to be personality than physical. For example, Harry Potter is extremely brave. Bravery is a characteristic that most human beings possess in some form and some quantity. In Harry, this bravery is a little bit more prominent because of the situation he's in. Most of us are not faced with defeating the darkest wizard of all time, so maybe our courage doesn't come out quite as much as his does. But Harry is realistic enough that we can see ourselves in him. Even though he is very brave, he's also scared at times, and we can relate to that. It speaks to something very human deep inside of us. Now say that an aspiring writer comes along and is very inspired by Harry and his bravery and writes a character that's very similar to that but emphasizes the bravery. Because that's what we do as writers, right? We emphasize these characteristics that we see. Then someone else comes along inspired by this character that was inspired by Harry and they make them even more brave. See what I'm getting at? Eventually we get to a point where you have a character who is not realistic, and as a reader you're reading it and saying, this is nothing like I am. I don't see myself in this. I could never be like this. Your readers need to be able to recognize themselves in your character. That's how we connect to characters and to stories. Of course, this doesn't mean that you can't create an over-the-top, courageous character, just like an artist can paint people with gigantic eyes if they want to. But it's all a matter of awareness. And of course, we need to study other books so we can learn technique, just like an aspiring artist needs to study other artwork so they can understand technique. But we also need to make sure that we're getting out and experiencing and learning from human nature. You need to observe how people behave, interact, speak in real life, how they react to bad news, how they react to a really happy event. We've probably all read books where a character was really unrealistic, and we all know how much of a turnoff that can be in a book. So my message to you today, word nerds, is get out of the house this weekend. Go out and people watch at the mall, hang out with some friends, observe human beings so that you can write about human beings. Go out and get inspired, and then come back, sit down, and get to work. Speaking of getting to work, this Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time, we are going to be live chatting about prepping for Camp NaNoWriMo. Make sure to be there. We would love to talk to you about what you're going to be working on next month and how you're getting ready for it and how you can get ready for it. See you next time.